Good evening. Welcome to the June 14th, 2021 Town Council meeting. I call this meeting to order, and I see in attendance all 7 councilors. Please join me on this Flag Day for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Actually, I already did attendance. Everybody's in attendance. So item number 4, public engagement. Carrie.
Yes. Hi, Chair. The only one that has asked to speak tonight is Julie Scott of 226 Main Street, and I do see her on.
Okay, Ms. Scott, if you could introduce yourself, and you know we have 3 minutes and we'll not engage in back and forth, but you can put it on a future agenda as well.
Okay, thank you. My name is Julie Scott. I live at 226 Main Street. I'm speaking to the Water Street tax title property issue on page 31 in your packets this evening. Cataldo Ambulance is in operation at 200 Water Street. They plan to purchase the property and update the building. A portion of the access land, which is 7,500 square feet, is owned by the town as tax title property. The property can be sold or disposed of with the sole approval of the town council. Administrator Mayo has written to the council that he would like you to approve the issuance of a request for proposal with the following caveat, quote, although price will be considered, the primary criterion will be the extent to which the proposed use of the land will further a public purpose, such as improving access for emergency vehicles serving the town of Wakefield. I ask that you not vote on this tonight. Rushing a vote to help Cataldo Ambulance, a privately owned company who does not yet even own the building or land in question, is not beneficial for taxpayers. I ask that other options be seriously considered prior to your future vote. The town of Wakefield does not own Cataldo Ambulance. Their vehicles are not owned by the town. When we renew contracts for ambulance services, we hopefully shop around and compare prices with other providers, as well as look into other services offered. We do not know if Cataldo Ambulance will gain our next contract. It seems to me that if Cataldo Ambulance has a specific land access need, that dramatically increases the value of the land that we own, the land that Cataldo Ambulance wants. Land in Wakefield is priced through the roof. Why is price not of primary criteria, but improving access for emergency vehicles that we don't even own is? Since Cataldo does not yet own the land, I also question why Cataldo Ambulance and not the property seller is dealing with Town Hall right now. Cataldo would be under no obligation to retain the property once purchased and developed for their use. If they sell in the future, included in their sale would be the benefits of us giving or selling them land as a very sweet deal. The company wants the land to improve their profitability, not to improve service to our town. This potential deal is not about Cataldo Ambulance doing the town of Wakefield a favor. A land giveaway is bad for Wakefield taxpayers. What is the town doing giving a sweetheart deal to a company that provides us a service that we pay for? For Cataldo, this is all about profit, not service to the town of Wakefield. I want my town councilors to look out for taxpayers. This action would not benefit the taxpayer, and I ask that you look at all angles of this scenario. Cataldo Ambulance is not a town department. It does not have to continue operating in Wakefield in the future. Selling land in this current market should in fact have a price as primary criteria. Helping out Cataldo Ambulance's growing business model is not what the town of Wakefield should be in the business of doing. Thanks, and have a great night. Thank you.
And we will be discussing this as item number 9. Is there anybody else on the phone or Zoom that would like to provide public comment? Yeah. So seeing none, thank you. We will move on to item number 5, approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion about the minutes from the May 24th, 2021 meeting? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Counselor Chines,
Yes.
Counselor Danahy,
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski,
Aye.
Counselor May,
Yes.
Counselor Santos,
Yes.
Counselor Butt,
Yes.
myself, yes. Thank you. Okay, item number 6, the Broadway crossing. Mr. Renaud, you're on.
Good evening. I appreciate the time. I got a quick PowerPoint to give you an update on where we stand with Broadway. Next slide, please, Ryan. So just to give a quick little background, because I'm sure there are some folks that haven't heard, the whole background and kind of where we are. But the town has a pre-rule quiet zone that was established back in the 90s and early zeros, which requires the trains to not blow their horns at each of the crossings within the town of Wakefield. As part of the development of the pre-rule quiet zone, we were required to install supplemental safety measures at several crossings throughout the town back when it was established. These supplemental safety measures are the center islands that you see on Prospect Street and on Broadway, also the one-way that was changed onto Chestnut Street. It's important to note that while Broadway is the one that is closed right now, and I'll talk a little bit why that is, the whole quiet zone for the town is actually for all of the crossings. So it's basically an average out of the entire network as opposed to just Broadway. So back in November of 2020, the Federal Rail Administration provided notification to the town that we cannot reopen the Broadway crossing and maintain our quiet zone due to some issues throughout the quiet zone and how the supplemental safety measures were initially installed. The specific ones that they were referring to was the Broadway crossing as well as Prospect Street. So back in December of 2020, my staff and I filed an amended notice of establishment, basically to, what the notice of establishment does is temporarily close Broadway while we worked out an amended public authority application to go with alternative safety measures. So what that means is the supplemental safety measures have to be done to the rules that are laid out by the Federal Rail Administration. If for certain reasons we can't actually meet the distances and the requirements specifically laid out, we can apply for what's called alternative safety measures, which is what we should have done for Prospect Street and for Broadway back when this was done in the 90s and early zeros. We received an approval of the establishment which maintained our quiet zone back in January of 21. And the first response that we got on our alternative safety measure submittal was in May of 21, where they noted that they disagreed with our Prospect Street calculations and then requested some more protections in other locations. So I came back to you, I would say about 3 weeks ago, talking about adding in a new a new alternative safety measure on Greenwood. Since then, they've requested some other modifications to the Broadway submittal. This was after I had submitted the Greenwood submittal. And then I received another response from them last week where they asked us to look at smaller options for smaller islands and alternative safety measures at Forest Street and alternative options for Broadway. If we jump to the next slide, I can kind of show you what I'm talking about with the alternative options. So what this shows is the Broadway option that we initially had submitted. If you look at the quadrants, we have, the north, our northwest quadrant would be the top left, the northeast to be on the top right. And our proposal was to install new curbing about 70 feet from the right of way of the railroad on both sides of the northern portion of the intersection, and actually expand the sidewalk on the southwestern portion to shrink up the driveway to meet the criteria that's laid out. In this example, what we end up with is essentially 3/4 of the Broadway crossing being completely compliant with the Federal Rail guidelines. And so we were proposing essentially taking a 75% credit within the submittal. That would allow us to reopen Broadway and maintain our quiet zone. we received comments back to come up with an alternative Broadway option, which was submitted on Friday. If you jump to the next slide, please, Ryan. So option 2, you'll see that everything on the western side remains the same. On the eastern side, we're looking at a smaller raised median of only 25 feet with smaller sections of sidewalk being installed on the northern portion, and also a small one on the southeastern portion, which would require us to narrow the existing commercial driveway and reroute some of their traffic through an abutter. So working with that abutter to talk about that option, and he's supportive of this, of what you're seeing here. Essentially what we find is that, believe it or not, this smaller crossing provides the same level of protection according to the calculations with FRA. While I'm not as supportive of this, we gave this as an option based on the comments that we received from them. Jump to the next slide, Ryan. They also looked at Forest Street. So Forest Street, as it comes down into Main Street, I'm sure if you've ever tried to drive through here, you have to kind of neck your way out into Main Street. So we were already looking at doing something similar out here at some point in the future. So we're just advancing something based on FRA's comments for this intersection. This proposes a small 17-foot island by Main Street. The bump outs are what's shown in red. The islands are what's shown in green. And then we would also do a 20-foot small island between Atwood Ave and the train tracks. Both of these are designed so that they would have no impact on turning in or out. So it's essentially just to meet the requirements from FRA and provide a smaller benefit of risk index reduction. If we jump to the next one, Ryan. Next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you. So these are what we had presented at the last one, where we took a Greenwood Street on the right portion of the slide as a temporary new mountable median that would be essentially on the Stoneham side of Greenwood Street. And then the Prospect Street that we had talked about before, the area in purple, that off ramp that comes from North Ave, we were receiving no credit based on the comments that I got from FRA. So if we jump to the next slide, Ryan.
Steve, do we need to, excuse me, Bill, just one moment. Do we need to open the public meeting?
I think you should open the 7:10 public hearing and then quickly table it until you finish with Bill.
Okay. So we're gonna have a roll call vote to open the 7:10 public meeting. Councilor Chines.
Madam Chair, do you need a motion?
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, of course I do.
All right, I move to open the 7:10 public hearing, please.
Second.
Roll call. Councilor Chines.
Yes.
Councilor Danahy.
Yes.
Councilor Dombrowski.
Aye.
Councilor May.
Yes.
Councilor Santos.
Yes.
Councilor Butt.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay, so now we have the hearing open. It's okay to go back to,
I think it's just tabling it until
okay,
we go then. We'll consider that motion part of Jonathan's motion, if that's okay, Jonathan.
Yes, that's fine.
okay, all right. Sorry, Bill, go ahead.
No problem. So just back to the last slide, Ryan, please. Yep, so basically just talking about next steps. So with the submittal I had last week, we were able to actually coordinate a conversation with the Federal Rail Administration's Quiet Zone Reviewer. That's something new, considering I haven't been able to get an ability to talk to this person for essentially this whole entire time. So we've been dealing with our local FRA rep and essentially, expressing our concerns with some of the comments that we've been receiving, and he basically sends that back to the reviewer. Then the reviewer writes something to him that gets transmitted back to me. So we've been essentially playing a telephone game for the past three months or so. So I'm able to coordinate a conversation with the reviewer as well as the staff director, her boss, this week. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get consensus on this and hopefully be able to put this to bed. I was informed today that there may be a possibility of a new 60-day appeal period. So when I initially had submitted my first application in December, we had to wait for a 60-day appeal period. That may have to happen again. So they may ask me to go re-notify any person that uses the rail. So that includes some Amtrak for some of the larger freight stuff that comes through the MBTA, as well as a whole slew of other folks that we did as part of the initial submittal. But I'm hoping to be able to circumvent that if we can, obviously with the time that we've been spending here waiting for them to get back to us, I think. And we received no comments in the initial 60-day appeal period. So I'm hopeful that we'll be all set with that. So as soon as I get the go-ahead from FRA, we'd be looking to install the improvements that I just presented today. That would be an ASAP thing. We have a contractor that is essentially on board for us right now. We have a material and labor bid that we can essentially just deploy at any moment. So that person is ready to go. We would be looking to have them already pick up the curbing and have everything ready to go. So as soon as we're able to get out there and give the go-ahead to start these improvements, we would do that. And then the next steps is we'll be requesting funding for design and construction of a quad gate system, probably in the fall town meeting. If we're unsuccessful with a few of the grant applications that we've applied. So we've filed with Rep. Moulton's office for a what do you call it? A earmark for that work. And then the timing of installing the quad gate system is going to dovetail with some work that MBTA has. So they've told us that that would be a couple of years out, probably in all likelihood. So somewhere in 22, 23, we would start the work on that. Again, that's not needed to open up the crossing. That's just to ensure that we don't have this happen down the road. So if you remember in my previous 2 or 3 of these updates I've provided, that we had alternative plans. That's what you saw in these slides before, and then the quad gate system, just to make sure that we're good in the long term. So any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Ed,
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Bill, for this update. Can you remind me, I know that this system, it's set up so that it's a scoring system and we have to be able to fall within a certain threshold to keep our quiet zone status. Is there the possibility of being able to have, say, roving closures where, say, we close down Chestnut for 1 week, we close down the Prospect Street ramp for 1 week? I know some of them we can't, or I don't know if we make them one way or whatever the case is. Is there any way to at least kind of spread that, across the stations that would, or the crossings that would accommodate it, so as to not keep Broadway itself continuously closed?
Unfortunately, Broadway has the highest, because of the accident that happened, I believe in the last 5 years or so, whenever that was prior to me being here, but when that accident happened, that actually elevated the risk status of that intersection specifically. So if you add up all of the risk indexes for the other ones, they essentially add up to what Broadway's risk index is today.
So we would literally have to really almost close all the others in order to meet the thresholds to open up Broadway, is what you're saying?
Yeah, which I don't see as a viable option,
right
around town. So and believe me, I know it's an issue, and we've been calling on the FRA pretty much on a daily basis, if not every other day. I know Steve has been involved in that with me as well. We've been constantly trying to get comments. I mean, unfortunately, and Steve, I think was right when we were talking last week about it. They've moved the goal line on us a couple of times here. Unfortunately, when I get a set of comments back, my intent would be to respond to all of the comments, not when I resubmit, then have another comment on something that I haven't changed. So that happened to me as well. So that's unfortunate. That's why I basically said we have to talk to whoever the head of the section is to review this, because the reviewer is providing these things incrementally to me, and I mean that's just not feasible and not sustainable for us to get this thing approved. So,
and do we have any leverage at all with Representative Moulton? Is he able to advance, now that you have a point person, is he able to advance that discussion or expedite things in any way?
He's aware of the issue. I know that Steve has at least reached out to his office, so he's very well aware and has, pushed the group that handles this aspect of FRA. But unfortunately, the federal government works at a different speed, I think, than we do here at the local level.
I actually think Bill did a great job in getting this meeting with not only the reviewer, but the reviewer's superior as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, correct.
Because it felt like the Wizard of Oz for a while there, where you really truly didn't have a person that you were dealing with, and that just seemed incredibly frustrating. So I'm glad to hear that you're making. I know, Bill, that you are doing all that you can, but as we all know, and as we're all hearing, obviously residents are looking for this to have opened months ago, and we all understand the concerns.
Right.
But thank you for all the work you're doing in that regard.
Great, thank you.
Ed, I'm sorry, Jonathan. Jonathan, go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Renaud, for all of your work on this. I know, you probably hear frustration from us on the council, which I know you share and probably live every single day. So I really am grateful for, you're continuing to kind of push this through and, manage through what does seem to be sort of a moving target in terms of the feedback that we've gotten from FRA. I had a couple of questions just around sort of the time and money aspects of what's next. So, when we talk about the remediations to both now Broadway and Forest Street, what's your sense as to the time that it would take to put those in, once we get the go ahead? Is that a few weeks? Is that a few months? How do you think about the timing there?
Yeah, so previously when I had talked about it, I said that I would expect it to be about a week's worth of work. And we were talking really about just making improvements at Broadway. With the other intersections that we have to do, I mean, honestly, Greenwood's probably a day's worth of work. So that's not a big deal. It's the area on Forest Street to do those bump outs. That will take some time. We kind of just did that down the street, if you recall, with the shared streets grant that that we just completed the other week. So I'm expecting that to be probably a 3-week process at this point, with the changes. Again, I am, we are also including, with Forest Street, that gets us a lot lower below the number. So we may be able to defer some of that work, allow Broadway to open, and then kind of do a phased opening.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm exploring that. That's going to be part of my conversation with them this week as well. So anything we can do to expedite, I'm definitely going to do. As for the financial component of it, well, we actually have some interesting situations here. So I had been negotiating with MBTA for the Forest Street component, that intersection and bump out. I had asked them to do that as a cost share because they're looking to do some relocation of some bus stops around town. So I have at least a understanding, not a written agreement yet, but we have essentially an agreement in principle on them funding most of that work. So that will offset some of the costs. We negotiated with National Grid to actually cover the sidewalk costs previously. So that's something that I was already planning to do as a longer term phase. So we're covered there as well. And then the center islands that have to go back in Broadway, National Grid has to install those as part of their permit. So from a cost standpoint, we're actually in good shape. We're getting most of this stuff for free. Just unfortunately, obviously we're paying with, aggravation, frustration, and travel time. So.
Okay. And then one final question on the timing. And the answer to this, maybe I don't know, but do you have a sense if we do go through, or if we are required to do a 60-day comment period, is it possible to do some of this work kind of contemporaneously with the comment period, just to avoid, 2 months of waiting followed by then, call it a month of construction?
Definitely, I don't see a problem with doing any of that. Yeah, we just might have to keep Broadway closed while they're installed, but
but at least then theoretically we could shorten the total time to just the comment period and not the comment period plus.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, great. Well, listen, thank you so much. Again, I appreciate all the work that went into this, and I am encouraged that you've actually been able to speak to a person, and hope we get some good news when you meet with them later this week.
All right. Fingers crossed, everybody. So thank you very much, as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Anne?
Thanks, Bill. Just briefly, I feel like we've been here before where it seemed like we were going to get good news to open up. I can't even imagine how frustrated you've been. Steve has kept me abreast of some of that. But, if we still keep getting stymied, I think at some point we have to have a conversation about the quiet zone. I mean, Broadway cannot stay closed forever. These poor people, they're frustrated. I appreciate it. As I've said before, I used Broadway 5 times a day, but I can go around easier. In the businesses on Broadway, if we're still going to hit the wall, that's a conversation we have to have. And it's going to be a balancing of interest. I hope we don't go there. We will have no friends in either decision. We have no friends, but not that we need friends, but.
Right. Unfortunately, you just got to keep in mind that it's not just tooting a horn, at one crossing. It's
Oh, I
based
know.
town line to town line, because we have so many crossings and I have to do it at a certain distance.
Yeah. No, Bill, I remember. I
Oh, yeah.
remember when it wasn't a quiet zone. I can hear it from my house. It's somewhat muted, but I can hear it. But for the love of God, Broadway, I mean, these has to get open. So I'm hoping this week, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Say good thoughts. But thank you for all your hard work. I know how hard you're working.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else? And Danny?
Hi, thank you, Bill, for all your perseverance on this. I know that this is really frustrating for residents in town, and I hear that it's been incredibly frustrating for you not being able to get in touch with that person who can ultimately make decisions. But it sounds like your persistence is paying off and that we're making some headway. So I just hope that we can continue to make that headway. And if not, if we can perhaps put some, communicate with Congressman Moulton's office as well in terms of, say, this is what we need you to do for us, because, but I'm confident that things are going to be headed on the right track because of your persistence. So thank you. It's, I feel a little bit more optimistic tonight.
There you go. That's good. I do as well, just so you know. I do.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, anybody else? Thanks, Bill, for all your hard work and for keeping us posted. It's not an easy situation.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Sure. Okay, so I think here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna open the water and sewer public hearing and then continue
Table
it,
Yeah,
right?
continue at the same time. Yeah,
So we'll do two at the same time, then we'll go back and do the first public hearing,
exactly.
close out and do the second. Okay, so do I have a motion to open the 7:25 public hearing on the 2022 water and sewer rates?
So moved.
Second,
Okay. Roll call vote. Jonathan,
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
Danny, sorry, Councilor Danny, Councilor Dombrowski, last
Aye.
name. Councilor May,
Yes.
Councilor Santos,
yes.
Councilor Butt,
Yes.
myself, yes. Okay,
And I think we'll also note that that motion did include continuing that until we.
yes. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so let's go back to a motion to change of manager, stock transfer, change of officer and director, and pledge of license amendment for Chinese Discount Liquors, doing business as Greenwood Wine and Spirits. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we're gonna have discussion on this. Anybody want to give a presentation?
Yeah, good evening. This is Attorney John Muradian, Democus Law Offices. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Like I mentioned, John Muradian, Democus Law Offices. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Greeny's Discount Liquors, Inc. Essentially what's going on here is Cynthia Newell, the current sole shareholder, is selling her stock to Hitesh Bhai Patel, Shashim Patel, KJ Investment LLC, which is run by Anand and Nirav Kumar Patel. And we're seeking a stock transfer this evening, approval of a change of officers and directors, and approval of a pledge of the license and inventory to the savings bank as they're financing the deal. And lastly, approval of a Shashim Patel, who's with me tonight on the Zoom call, as the manager of record. It's going to be the same exact store, no change to the physical layout. It's going to remain a liquor store over at 969 Main Street. Shasheen is tip certified. He's been working at the store for the past couple weeks to get some training in on working at the store. They have an ID scanner. He told me they have about 6 or 7 employees to go along with him. But with that, I'll welcome any questions you may have on the request before you.
Thank you. Any counselors have any questions? Ed, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just stress that, every time that we have a situation like this, it's so important when we have a very good business in our community that is changing hands. I think Greenwood Wine and Spirits has a great reputation, and I think it's a real credit to the owner. And I would just ask the new ownership, there's not opportunity to plant trees or do much other of my normal requests, certainly. But in this instance, I would just really stress that there has been a reputation that's been developed for this business. And I would just plead with you to please maintain the caliber and quality of the service and experience that is being offered there, because we have a wide range of different businesses within town, and this is one of the really good ones. It's just so important. So I'd invite the owners to offer us their input or their thoughts in terms of how they're able to maintain the standards and even perhaps raise them going forward, because I think ultimately it benefits the community when you do that.
Right. Jake, could you please speak to that, your experience and with you and your partners on operating liquor stores and to run a nice, clean store without, violations for underage sales, and be a strong member of the community? Could you just speak to that real quick?
Is that me? I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Shashin Patel. Yes, I have experience in the past working at the liquor stores and maintaining all the rules and laws and regulations. And I will, moving forward, I will make sure that it's staying maintained. I'm the strict rules follower, and we'll have a good business established. I would carry over Cindy's business in a good spirit moving forward.
Else have any comments? I just want to say it's Cindy, you've been a great asset to the Greenwood, the store, and your community work as well with Wake Up. So thank you so much.
She has done a fantastic job. She's a really good human being. She's done a fantastic job. I can see that. I can feel it already.
Thank you. And I know that Sonny will continue. He's already expressed interest in serving on the Wakefield Linfield Chamber of Commerce. So he really wants to become part of the community. And I just thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to serve the community, to raise my kids in the community. I've been very lucky. So thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Anybody from the public like to, and Danny, go ahead and then we'll do public.
I just wanted to take this opportunity. I think I've known Cindy for over 20 years probably. And as a Greenwood resident, I just want to say thank you for running such a great business and being such an active member in the community, and being involved in Wake Up and your work in the community has not gone unnoticed. So best of luck to you.
Thank you, Ann.
Okay, anybody from the community have any comments or questions? Raise your hand or, okay. So seeing none, we have a motion for the change of manager, stock transfer, change of officer, director, and pledge of license amendment for Greenie's Discount Liquors and Greenwood Wine and Spirits. We're going to do a roll call vote. Councillor Chines.
Yes.
Councillor Danahy.
Yes.
Councillor Dombrowski.
Yes, with best wishes to everyone.
Councillor May.
Thank you.
Councillor May. Councillor Santos.
Yes, and as well. Thank you so much, Cindy, and welcome, Mr. Patel.
Thank you.
Yes.
Great, thanks. Councillor Butt.
Yes, and did you hear Councillor May said yes? Yep.
Yes, I did. Thank you. And myself, yes. Okay, well, congratulations to everyone. Welcome to the Patels and good luck, Cindy.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Madam Chair, you will need a vote to close the public hearing.
Yes, okay. So we're going to close this public hearing. Before we move on to the next one, Councillor Chines.
Probably a motion.
A motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, Counselor Fines. Counselor Danahy.
Yes.
Counselor Dobrowski.
yes.
Counselor May.
Yes.
Counselor Santos. Yes, okay, I see the thumbs up. Counselor Bell.
Yes.
And myself, yes, okay. Okay,
And Madam Chair, before you get to the water and sewer rates, you may want to take care of item 7.
okay, can I go back and do that while we're in?
Sure can, yep.
Excellent, let's do that so we can get Tonos along here. So, item 7, we have can I get a motion for a change of manager for CMRG LLC / Tono Wakefield?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Is there somebody?
A quick, Madam Chair, through you to Mr. Mullen. So I assume the reason we don't do a public hearing for this is that this is just a change of manager and not a change of ownership?
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. The state has what's called a blue book, which is a list of when a hearing is required for various kinds of actions on ABCC licenses. And I believe this change of manager doesn't require the public hearing that the others do.
Correct.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Was there somebody who wanted to make a presentation on this? Or we can simply move to discussion?
I think the gentleman talking is on mute.
I see, John, I think
John
you're on
Typo.
mute. We're working on it. See, Mr. Galino. Let me see if I can ask to unmute you.
I think I'm off.
Oh, there you are. You're good. Go ahead.
Am I up?
You're good. Yeah.
I'm here.
Okay. Please proceed.
What would you like to know?
Well, I didn't know whether you had any comments. We can ask any questions. So open it up to.
I
No?
can't really hear you. Let me
Okay.
fix this.
Okay.
There it is. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we
Okay,
can.
good.
But I don't think we have any questions.
Okay. I'm totally experienced to handle this situation, so you don't have to worry about it. I've been around a long time.
Okay.
Have you been by the restaurant lately?
Mhm.
Yes.
It's very popular right now.
It's
The
a,
patio.
yes, it's a pleasure to have you in town. So it's so great.
Oh, that's
Okay.
good.
So Ed, please, you had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Madam Chair, can we just confirm, just like for the record, that everything is in order with Town Administrator's Office and Madam Clerk, and we have the tip certification and all the sorts of things that are the ordinary course when we have these?
Yes, we have everything. We have the tip certification, fingerprinted. He's all set, ready to go.
Thank you. And if you could just give us just a little bit of background, in terms of your experience. I know normally when we have these transitions, we know a little bit about the person who would be taking over as manager, if you could indulge us.
Well, I've been in the business over, I hate to say it because it dates me, 40 years. I worked for Legal Seafoods for 23 years. I worked for pretty much every company in Boston, Back Bay Restaurant Group, Lions Group, Delaware North. I've worked, I have a lot of experience with restaurants and liquor sales. So I think, I don't know. I think I'm qualified to hold a license for Tono Wakefield.
And no issues?
No. In my background, no.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
The questions from the councilors? Okay, so we have a motion to change the manager of CMRG LLC, Tono Wakefield. We'll do a vote. Counselor Chines,
Yes.
Counselor Ganahy,
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski,
Aye.
Counselor May,
Yes.
Counselor Santos, Counselor Butt.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Myself. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
have
you.
a New manager.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, so now we're gonna go back to our second public hearing of the night, the fiscal year 2022 water and sewer rates. And I believe I'm gonna hand this over to our DPW director, Joe Conway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joseph Conway, Public Works Director. Joining me tonight is Ann Waite, the Public Works Business Manager. I think Town Engineer Bill Renault is still on the call, and Matt Abrahams of the Abrahams Group. So we're with you tonight to present the fiscal 22 water and sewer rate recommendations. Just a little context, this year, the Advisory Board of Public Works and the team at Public Works, we concluded that, with the abnormality that last year was and the rate study that we performed last year, we really needed to reevaluate our work that we did in the spring. We felt that that would be an exercise worth doing, seeing all the changes happened in basically every facet of life as we knew it. Our goal still was to reestablish the baseline and provide future projections for our enterprises, but we wanted to make sure that we could adjust if it was feasible or otherwise required. So we wanted to make sure we understood the financial picture 1 year post-COVID. Our ultimate goal didn't change. It was still to get to a point where revenues cover expenditures and to make sure that we were starting to align more symmetrically with the town financial policies. And part of this review, it was decided to bring the Abrahams Group back. The extent of the study last year, we felt that it was good to have their set of eyes kind of review the updated set of data. So in a moment, I'm actually going to ask if I could turn the presentation over to Matt Abrahams to review some of the work that the advisory board did with Public Works and how we came to our recommendations for fiscal 22. In conclusion, the Department of Public Works is requesting 6 votes of the council. They are the water and sewer service charges, the water rate, the sewer flat rate, the manual read meter fee, and the septic disposal form. I'll say that the service charges, the manual read meter fee, and the septic disposal formula are all going to be presented to you the same as they were last year. So there's no recommended change there. So without further ado, if nobody has any objection, I'd like to turn it over to Matt, and he can kind of walk you through some of the slides and some of the data to get us to tonight.
Good evening, everyone. This is Matt Abrahams from the Abrahams Group. Thank you, Joe, for the introduction. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Is that a yes? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm just planning on walking through the slides. The slides will cover all or at least most of the things that Joe just mentioned a moment ago. We'll walk you through the work that was done. We'll talk about the board recommended rate plans, and then we'll head to any questions and comments at the conclusion. Next slide, please. So FY21 in review for water. So before we dive into looking forward, which would be FY22 and beyond, we did want to take a quick look at what FY21 looks like. FY20 is the current fiscal year, as everybody knows. So there are approximately 8,500 water accounts in town. If we think back to last year at this time, there was a service charge in place of $18 per bill. Out of the work that we did for the town, that was increased to $19.16 per bill for the smallest meters. Those are meters up to 1 inch in size. And the service charge was increased to larger amounts for meters larger than 1 inch in size. At that time, there was a flat rate a flat rate for water. There was no tier structure in place. As part of the work that we did, one was implemented. It's a 4-tier rate structure. At the time, we thought that moving forward, FY22 through FY25, an additional rate increase of 7.7% per year would be necessary. That was based on what all the numbers were telling us last year at this time. And you'll see what the updated rate plan is momentarily. Consumption build for FY21 was about 82 million cubic feet. That does not include the municipal consumption. That was up 6.2% from last year's consumption. And that was on top of an increase the prior year as well. With the increase in consumption comes increased billings, up over $850,000 or 14% compared to last year. And ultimately, this means financially good news for the enterprise fund, the water enterprise fund. We're projecting a surplus of over $400,000 for FY21. Next slide, please. This slide talks a little bit about what the budget makeup is for the water fund. On the left-hand side, you see the breakdown there, with the Mwra assessment being the largest portion of the budget, about 47%. Debt makes up only 8%, personnel 22%. On the revenue side, user charges make up 87% of the revenues that come through the door for FY21, what we're projecting. And service charges an additional $600,000. And if we're looking at retained earnings, the last certification that took place was just over $1 million, which was 16.5% of the budget. That's a healthy retained earnings balance. And we're projecting at the end of FY21 about $977,000. That assumes that the spending for the budget takes place, the expenditure side completely spent the budget, and the user charges collections that we're projecting take place. Next slide, please. All right. For FY22, we're starting to look forward a little bit here. We're still on water slides. We'll do the same slides for sewer momentarily. Total expenses, we're projecting that they're going to increase 4.6% per year from FY22 to FY26. For Mwra assessment, we have it down slightly in FY22 from FY21. We were looking at an average increase of 9.5% prior 5 years, but now it's down for FY22. Part of the reason is that the town is less reliant on Mwra's water with the treatment plant operating. And just an FYI that we're using a new projection methodology this year that we did at this time last year when we did the work for the town. It's based on a town's flow share rather than just looking at what the average increase was from year to year. Existing debt, it is increasing in FY22, 1 year increase of over $100,000, and then it decreases each year after that. Capital, $250,000 in FY22. This time last year, we were focused on this as well. A renewed capital investment of an additional $125,000 per year, ramping up to $500,000 per year. So we're about halfway there at this point. And we've listed some upcoming larger scale capital projects that are on the horizon, including a water tower removal in FY22 for $3 million and downtown mains project in FY24 for $2 million. Next slide, please. Sewer, same slide, different numbers a little bit. I'll go through them quickly. The service charge, same setup as we did for water. There was a $20 per bill. That was the same for all users. It was increased to $21.40 per bill for the smallest meters, which are up to 1 inch. Meters larger than 1 inch, the increases were larger for those customers. Again, a 4-tier rate structure was put in place for water. Prior it was a flat rate. I'm sorry, for sewer. Prior it was a flat rate. And the rate plan last year, in addition to the tier changes from FY22 through FY25, was to increase rates 4.5%. Flow is up again, just like water, 5.8% from FY20. That's after last year's increase of 8.4%. Just like water, billings are up over $800,000 or 8% compared to last year. And again, another projected surplus of over $400,000. Next slide, please. Similar budget slide as we had for water. The MWR assessment on the sewer side is, again, the largest component of the budget, 75% in this case for sewer, which is a higher percentage than it is for water. Debt really low, 3%, personnel 10%. And on the revenue side, user charges 90%, service charges 7%. Last retained earnings certification was over $850,000 or 10% of the budget. And we're projecting that'll be up over $1 million at the end of FY21, which is about 12% of the budget. Next slide, please. Just like with water, we're projecting that total expenses are going up 4.5% per year, FY22 through 26. The MWA assessment is down 1% compared to the FY21 appropriation. For 21, the MWA had deferred some of their planned capital investments through the pandemic. That's the main reason why it was a little bit lower in FY21. Overall, the average increase for the town was 3.2% the last 5 years. And in our projections, we're increasing it at 4.4% per year, just because we're accounting for MWA's recommitment to that capital program that was just mentioned. For debt, we have a small decrease in FY22 with it decreasing beyond that. Capital, similar setup to water, $125,000 per year, ramping up to $500,000 per year. This year it's $170,000. So again, another step in the process of getting to that $500,000. And there is one anticipated MWRA loan in FY22, but in terms of planned borrowings, there aren't as many here as there are for water. Next slide, please. So here's our baseline slide, which is basically looking forward the next 5 fiscal years. So we do have 21 in there. We talked a little bit about how we think that's going to end up. This is the water slide, but for FY22 through 26 now, that's our new 5-year look. This is what we have as our current projection. So for baseline, which is the do nothing scenario, that's if the rates do not change. Which is presumably would not happen, but we do like to show that this is how quickly retained earnings would drain on the water side, just so that the council's aware if there is no rate action. So what this is telling us is that there are enough retained earnings to get you through FY22 with the current planned expenditures and projected revenue, but not beyond that. Next slide, please. Oh, and I'm sorry. This is the sewer slide, same slide, similar setup. Just like for water, there are enough retained earnings to get the fund through FY22, but not beyond that. Next slide, please. Service charge. I know Joe mentioned this a few moments ago. We're going to talk briefly about it. So if we think back to last year, the plan that was in place at the time, and this was sponsored by the board as well, that we planned on not, take a step back for a second. So the service charge was voted last year with the intent to recover administrative costs that were calculated within both the water and the sewer fund. There's a little bit of a break with the sensitivity around the pandemic and trying to be fair to users. Everyone thought it was best not to implement the service charge at 100% at this point in time last year. So instead, the plan was to implement it at 65%, meaning the goal at that point was to recover 65% of the administrative costs that have been calculated, with the plan to recover an additional 5% per year until 100% recovery, which would be a few years in the future. What was the recommended plan this time around was not to increase the service charge to recover the additional 5% that was talked about. So essentially, the recommendation was to leave the service charge the same for FY22, even though last year at this time, the plan was to increase it and recover an additional 5%. So I just want to make sure that the council is aware of that. And that's essentially what this slide talks about. Next slide, please. So you can see here, and we mentioned it in the second bullet here, that the phased approach to start with 65% cost recovery in FY21, 70% in FY22, then would be 75% in FY23 if implemented. But ultimately, the Advisory Board of Public Works did not recommend that the increase take place, and that's what the table down below shows, that the service charge would be the same for FY22 as it was for FY21. Next slide, please. Same for sewer. So the service charge would be the same for FY22 as it is for FY21. Next slide, please. Rate setting objectives. This is bigger picture, and some of these objectives were in place or were focuses last year at this time as well. Emphasis on sustainable and more predictable financial future, more proactive, less reactive. That's the second year of this model. Assume the users take advantage of on-time payment discount of 10%. All of our calculations included that. We just want to make sure that we were assuming that, and we have in all of our calculations. The target for retained earnings, 8.5% of expenditures. Last year at this time, we were targeting 7.5%, but we've increased it to 8.5% because of the strong FY21 as described earlier, with the longer term goal of 10%, and that longer term goal of 10% was in place last year too. That is consistent with town's policy for reserves. The rates are to recover annual capital improvement needs with limited debt. We talked a little bit about how debt is really low for both funds, and a lot of the capital improvements are taken care of without incurring additional debt. The ultimate goal is to have rates fully cover expenditures, and we feel that the town is on track for that. Not there yet, but on track for that. Next slide, please. So here is the Advisory Board of Public Works recommended option for water. So when we first presented rate plans to the Advisory Board of Public Works, we had a few different options. They did include the service charge at that point because of the plan that was sponsored last year. We had assumed that it would be increased this year, and we were asked to come back with additional options that did not have the service charge increase in there. And this plan, as mentioned earlier, does not have the service charge increase in there. So before I talk a little bit more about the plan, let's think back to where we were at last year. I think I've already forgotten the number, but it was somewhere in the 7% range that we had presented as additional rate changes FY22 through FY25. I mentioned how the rate plan has changed because of FY21, how strong it's been financially for the water fund, but for other reasons too, but that's the main driver there. So now we're presenting for your consideration a rate plan that has 3.5% in fiscal 22 with additional increases of 5.25% in each of the other fiscal years that we have in our plan, which would be FY23 through FY26. And presumably at this time next year when rates are set, there'll be another discussion on the service charge and whether to include it because that increase would be additional revenue for the fund as well. And you can see down there at the bottom that there are, we have some numbers for the impact on certain users' bills. We tend to focus on the second row, which is the average residential user. And these are quarterly bills, so that's a $5 something increase per bill. So it'll end up being about $21 per year for the average residential user for the 3.5% increase for FY22. This is water only. Next slide, please. And for sewer, similar setup on the slide. Again, no service charge increase here. The increase for year one, FY22, 2.15%, with higher increases somewhere in the 6% range for FY23 and beyond. Now, for the rate setting that presumably will take place this evening, that we're only focused on FY22, but we did like to complete the 5-year look so that everyone could consider what the next 5 years look like when making the decision for FY22. And for the average residential user, it's a similar setup as there is for water. It's it's about $20 per year with the 2.15% increase for sewer. Next slide, please. And we go from the 5-year look to simply a 1-year look with water and sewer tied together. On this slide, you can see the 3.5% increase for water. We've presented the what the rate would be if that were voted, and the discounted rate is next to it. So that rate in the middle column is before the discount. The discounted rate is right next to it, and we have the same table for sewer. And then down at the bottom, this is just FY22, what the current bill is, what the FY22 bill would be, and what the difference is. So you can see in the far right-hand column that for all the users we've presented in this table, including the average residential user, which is the second row, the increase per bill over the current year's bill is in the 2% range, somewhere from 2% to 2.6% higher. And if we focus on the two 10% discount columns for the average residential user, this is per bill, it's going up about $9 per bill, which ends up being in the $36 range for the entire year. And we can go to the next slide, but I think that's it. Yes, that's it. So I'm happy to take any questions and comments at this time.
For Mr. Abrams, DPW, Jonathan. Jonathan?
Thank you. I'm not sure, sorry, were you asking if anyone from the DPW had any comments before we?
No, I was asking if you had any comments for the DPW or Mr. Abrams. Sorry, I know my Wi-Fi is not great.
No problem. Okay, thank you very much. This has been a good presentation and helpful to walk through, and actually appreciate some of the context that probably answered some of the questions that I started with. I did actually have a couple of questions around retained earnings that I wanted to go through just to make sure I understood where we were coming from. And the first question that I just wanted to clarify is it looks like we have different starting points for the retained earnings for the 2021 projection on some of the slides, and I just wanted to understand the reason for that and make sure I was interpreting that correctly. So in the baseline water scenario, we've got 2021 projected retained earnings at about 976,000. But in the recommended scenario, it jumps up to 1.15 million. Can you help me understand the difference between those two numbers? I would have thought we would have started from the same 2021 baseline based on the experience that we already know about.
Through you, Madam Chair, can you just ask the question again, or I know you wanted to compare the baseline. What was the second one you were looking at? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so on page 8, the water baseline, the projected retained earnings for 2021 was 976,000.
Yep.
And then on page, sorry, give me a second, 14, the 2021 projected retained earnings are listed at 1.158. And I just wanted to understand why those two numbers were different, given that the rate action that, we're talking about today is affecting 2022 and on, or well, 2022. Really.
Oh, okay. I understand the question now. I'm sorry. Thank you. You're still talking about FY21. There are two FY21 numbers and they're different. Why are they different? Okay, so the answer is this, and we introduced a little bit of a different retained earnings calculation for this year's analysis. The reason why was because we had the ability to integrate the way that DOR does the certification every year. Last year, we weren't doing it quite at that level. We were simply just taking the starting balance and adding whatever projected deficit or surplus we had calculated, and that's your endpoint. This year, what we did was we actually went with the true calculation based on our numbers. And what they do is they, in addition to working in the projected surplus or deficit, there are reserves that are established at the start of every fiscal year. So if there are encumbrances that are held over for 1 year, if the budget is voted with retained earnings as to be used to balance the budget, those get held in a reserve that are closed out at the end of the next fiscal year. And then when the next certification happens, you reestablish them for the following fiscal year based on whatever the numbers are. So in our analysis, what we've done is we've actually calculated that reserve for FY22. So at the certification for FY21, there will be reserves held for FY22. And we're projecting, at this point, we're projecting a deficit for FY22 in our analysis without rate action. Well, I guess with the rate action as well, but and the numbers are different for that reason. So when you increase rates, you're expecting more revenue, therefore the deficit is less. That's really the difference. So I'm not sure if you've had a chance to see the workbooks, it's in there, but so it's really that the deficit that we're projecting for the baseline is about $488,000 for option 1, or for the rate option that's been recommended. I'm looking at water right now. I think that's what you're talking about is water. 339,000. So that's a difference of, it's not good on the fly, about 150,000, a little bit less, 148,000. So that should be somewhere where the difference between your two numbers.
Okay, great.
Hopefully, that made sense. I know
That's helpful, and
it's probably easier to show you than explain it.
Complexity that, you know, when you look at this stuff on the fly that you pick up on. So thinking about the, and again, I want to focus on water, because when you look at the retained earnings curves for sewer, you know, we're certainly above the target now, and we kind of bring that down over the next couple of years and basically hold it there. So that's a curve that looks good. You know, the curve is a little concerning when we look at the water side. And so as we think about the future, you know, is the intention that as we start to increase the service charge again, you know, by whatever percentage we go with, that would be sufficient to kind of keep us around that, you know, at least the 8.5% target, or would we need to be looking at higher rate increases in the out years? I mean, you know, if we look at sort of what's here, I mean, obviously we couldn't kind of follow that trajectory. It would put us in a pretty bad place in a couple of years. And so I'd just like to understand from a sensitivity standpoint, what would get us to the place where we can make the curve look similar to the sewer side, where we're kind of landing softly at that 8.5% target.
Yep. So through you, Madam Chair, I can answer this one as well. So what happened with the rate options that were considered, and I mentioned earlier how we were asked to do additional ones by the Advisory Board of Public Works. When we presented them, we presented a rate plan for water, the one that ended up being selected, with the graph going like this. And then we presented one that had additional revenue in the outlying years that had the graph more in line with what you're seeing for sewer. And I don't remember the exact reason why we chose the one that got presented, but the thinking, remember the thinking at the time was, well, we're going to vote. They were ultimately just voting for the FY22 increase that is presented to you, because what the thinking was at the time was, this is what we want for FY22, knowing that next year at this time, we're going to reanalyze everything and come up with presumably an additional rate plan at that time that will show the recovery that you're seeking. So I know that the revenue is not keeping up with expenditures, and you can see that in the graphs. But the thinking when they voted that option was, well, next year when we look at this, we'll make sure that it is. So presumably to make that happen, the rate plan will have to be a little bit higher, or it could be made up by the service charge increase going back into play. So that was one of the reasons why I mentioned that tonight we're focused. I know we present 5 years and we want 5 years to be considered when we make the decision for FY22, but ultimately FY22 rate is what's being considered tonight. So just, I guess the high level way to answer that would be, the board selected that option knowing that it's going to be looked at next year, and we'll make sure that the revenue is where it needs to be in the rate plan for next year.
Okay, great. And do you have, sorry, final question. Do you have a bit of the sensitivity around the service charge impact on total revenue? So, you know, if we look at 2023, we'd be looking at about $300,000 what's the magnitude of the service charge change that we need to look at to make up for that? I'm sorry, I apologize. I know I'm asking for math on the fly there.
No, that's okay. I'll take a stab at that, Matt.
Okay.
Councilor Chines, I think what we would probably do is reestablish an implementation plan. So we take a couple of years to get to that point. Think of this year as a pause. So the one thing, I'm speaking on behalf of the advisory board, but what I'm going to assume the thought process was in this is that the service charges are a billing component where you don't really have any control of your own destiny. It's fixed. So they took the opinion that taking the fixed cost out of the equation and leaving it up to, the endpoint user was going to be their preferred model. So we would, like Matt had said, go back to the drawing board next year, figure out what the requirement would have to be related to the service charge to make us, come full circle. And then we'd implement that in either a 3-year implementation or a 5-year implementation. I guess where we need to be.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the explanations and again the patience with all the questions.
Anytime.
Ed, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for this analysis that you provided to us. When we discussed this last year, this was really a trial program, this idea of having the 4 tiers. We had talked about it from the perspective of let's see where we're at a year from now. And it sounds as if all of the presentation tonight has been just focused on the assumption that we're just going to continue with the 4 tiers going forward. Do we know what where the numbers would land had we not had the 4-tiered system, but instead had just the single rate across the board based on consumption? Has that analysis been done? Because I think that would be helpful.
Councilor Dombrowski, I know for this year, I don't recall doing that analysis. What I could tell you last year was we highlighted Mass General Law, which actually was made aware to us and dictated because of the geographic region we're in with the MWRA. The law actually pretty clearly states that we have to implement a tiered system. If I can read, I'll paraphrase quickly, but Chapter 165, Section 2B of Mass General Law says, MWRA communities shall have a base rate that shall be increased in an increasing block rate. I know last year, if we were to only go the flat rate across the board approach, we were looking at an increase of almost 10%. What I can tell you about fiscal 21 is that 70% of the 34,000 and change bills that were issued by the water and sewer enterprises didn't exceed tier 2. So you had 75% of every bill that came out that didn't make it past tier 2, which was actually quite a large number. I didn't expect it to land there. With all those things being said, to kind of go backwards and think about a flat across the board approach, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably would have been looking at a double-digit rate increase, I would think, to keep pace.
But I guess the question is, with that though, what does that mean in terms of someone's bill, like the average bill? I guess is what I'm trying to get at. I know that fiscal 21 is a bit of an anomaly because people were home during the pandemic, so consumption was probably up undoubtedly. But my recall last year was when we had voted this in. I don't recall. Perhaps Mr. Mullen can enlighten me on that. I don't recall that being a mandate from the state that we had to have the tiered system. I thought that was something we had agreed to do on a trial basis.
It's just speaking to that. I know it was mentioned that and our withdrawal agreement from the MWRA was mentioned. It's kind of the regulatory authorities overseeing that. I don't know, Matt, if you have any comments about the difference in what a flat rate would be compared to the approach that we took.
I'm trying to do quick math and it's not going well so far, but I might be able to get you something momentarily.
I guess what I'm getting at is, would revenue have been higher or lower ultimately as a result of that? It's just kind of like the baseline question.
That's a good question.
Because the way that the tiered system, the way that it presents now is that if you don't use much water, then you're getting a low rate. If you consume more, then you're getting a higher rate. But the issue is, you know, as we've talked about, we don't separately meter for irrigation systems. We know that in pools and all the rest, we have this sewer component to folks, you know, who might use more water for that. It puts them up in a higher bracket. And so there's, you know, I think there are, you know, competing philosophies in terms of what makes sense, you know, relative to this. So I'm just curious, when we're looking at this bottom line revenue, which seems to be, you know, driving your forecasting and projecting out over the next several years, you know, what kind of an impact does this tiered system make, you know, in that revenue number and those projections? And I don't mean to put you on the spot with the math. So if you don't know offhand, I think it's an important question for us to understand.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Quick math, I could throw a quick number out at you, but I'm not fully confident in it. For water, just based on that 82 million and taking last year's, just want to make sure this is the right rate. It has to be. The prior year's rate, I increased it to 10% that Joe just said. So let's just assume that it went up 10% for FY21. I have the number at 6.5 million for what would have been billed. That's on the water side. And the actual billings that took place, I think were around 7 million. So definitely an increase in revenue because of the tiered system.
But also you have to offset that by consumption too, which you also said was up, right?
Right, yeah, right. But I also use the same consumption number to do that calculation.
Okay.
But that makes sense because, and Joe, just kind of thinking back to what we looked at last year, I'm just trying to remember. I think maybe the first tier might have been equal to the rate as it was the prior year. It's kind of ringing a bell. So that if that's the case, then I think that makes sense that, you know, you would expect revenues to definitely go up because the rates never went down per se. They only went up. It was just a question of, you know, how much they went up, and some of the higher tiers went up more than the lower tiers. That makes sense. So you're going to see additional revenue for those higher users that for sure than it would have been prior. But for the lower users, it should be somewhere in the same ballpark as it was prior.
And what about on the expenses side of things? I know we're focused a lot on revenue, kind of projecting out where that is. I know you've kind of used it seems like a baseline percentage going forward with expenses. Has there been much analysis in terms of how that number can drop, the expense number projected out over the years to come? I recognize 3/4 is MWRA and that's a variable, but we do have a quarter, you know, that we have some degree of control over, perhaps not debt, but some of the other aspects of it.
Yep, I can touch base on that. So if we go back to the end of February, early March, we made it absolutely the mission to make sure that any increase that we needed in either one of the two enterprises was as minimal as it could be. I took the approach to really challenge the staff to say, let's see how far you could stretch this and still remain effective. I do think that there's probably some work that we can still do related to that. I think we're just starting to pick up on the water end specifically our peak efficiencies with utilizing our plant at the right times. So I think, you know, you might look at some of these outlying years. I think that this point in time next year, we could be staring at a financial picture that isn't necessarily as projected. I think it might actually stand to improve a little bit, but I'm an optimist and I like a challenge. So.
Yeah, because just looking at that, I mean, this year in and of itself, we're probably like close to 2.15 and 3.5. So we're like hovering high twos or thereabouts, depending on like how you weight each of them. But then looking forward, we're looking at probably high fives, and you're projecting that out over the next 4 years. So it seems like even this might be a short-term fix. It may not seem as bad this year, but then you're also talking about adding in adding back the service fees and whatnot as service charges as well. So I just feel like that becomes an unruly proposition, you know, as the years go on, if we don't do something perhaps to adjust the expense side of things, because I don't think we can lean so heavily into revenue without causing a real burden for the consumers.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from counselors? Any questions or comments from the public? See none. Motion. So we actually have 6 votes to take. They are in the packet. Steve, can we do all of these at once?
I'm gonna say yes unless Tom Mullen tells me no.
Anne's shaking her head. Yeah,
I
pretty
just thought in the
complex.
past we had to do them separately, but I'll go with
Okay.
whatever Tom says.
Well, let's do them separately because I think it's important that people understand what they are as well. So the first be a motion to set the water and sewer service charges. And it ranges by meter size from $19.16 for water down to $319.35 depending on your tier. And for sewer, a range from $21.40 to $356.67. You have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any additional discussion on that? Right. Hearing none. Councillor Chines,
Yes.
Councillor Danahy,
Yes.
Councillor Dombrowski,
Aye.
Councillor May,
Yes.
Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Butt,
Yes.
Councillor Butt, and myself. Okay. For the second motion, we have set the water rate per 100 cubic feet for 4 tiers. Tier 1 start at 1 all the way down to tier 4, ending at over 6,000 at a range from $7.56 to $9.30. All of this is in the packet for the public as well. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? Yes.
Madam Chair, can I just ask that we do, before we're in this situation next year, we do have an analysis of where expenses can be, expense savings can be realized going forward, because these rates are one thing. Next year's rates are projected to be as a percentage considerably higher, and I want to make sure that we can make a decision knowing that everything possible has been done to try to get costs down, expenses down as much as possible. So I would just ask that it's with that understanding that we would go into this.
Absolutely.
I don't think we need to amend the motion with that, but definitely noted. Okay, any additional discussion? Vote, Councillor Chines.
One other thought as well, I think one of the things we saw this year, certainly my household is an example of that, is when you spend all your time at home, you use a lot more water. Presumably that's going to change in the next fiscal year, just as things are opening up and kids are going back to school. And so I would maybe also ask, Mr. Conway, just, for some consideration on really a fair amount of analysis as we get into the rate setting process next year, because, we've looked at kind of 2020 as an abnormal year, which it was, but from a trend perspective in terms of usage, I'd imagine that's also going to look a lot different as we go into the next year. And so, in addition to looking at the expense side, I think usage is another thing that probably bears, perhaps a little bit more attention and analysis than, it would in a quote unquote normal year.
Yes, absolutely. So there'll be a whole lot of things. The return, to what once was normal life. We saw most of our commercial shut down for a good period of time too, so there's going to be some consumption, fluctuations there too. Really, we're probably going to be back in the same point again next year. We're going to have to do a more in-depth analysis of everything because we're pivoting out of the major change and kind of adjusting to, not just at the risk of sounding cliche, we're adjusting to the new normal as it presents itself. So that'll certainly all be evaluated pretty strictly.
Thank you, and I'm sure you'll do a thorough and great job of it as always.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, did we
lose Julie?
I think we lost
I can
Julie.
go over. Okay, so we had a motion for water in the 4 tiers. And so let's do a vote. So let's go. Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor Dennehy.
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski.
Aye.
Counselor May.
Yes.
Counselor Santos.
Yes.
Myself is yes. Can we wait till Julie gets back or what? I see her. Hi. Julie, how do you vote on that water in the 4 tiers?
You're on mute and you're upside down.
There we go.
You vote yes. Thumbs up. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Yay. Unanimous. I'm not going to know what vote 3 is. Julie, can you jump back in?
Mute. Can't hear you.
You're on mute.
There, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you see me? Oh my gosh. Okay, so so we took vote number 2 on the water rate. So we'll go to the sewer rates. Per 100 cubic feet, 4 tiers, ranging from $11.44 up to $13.50. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Great. Any discussion on this? I apologize, I can't see everybody now, but Joe, when is the moratorium up on the sewer? Issue.
So in the memo that was voted on and adopted by the advisory board from 2019 said that needs to be reevaluated in 2022.
Okay.
One of the things that we're going to be doing over the summer, just while we're on the topic, we're going to do some cost analysis to show some projections if the council was to make a decision to re-implement that. The advisory board laid out a policy, basically 13 steps to put that into motion. One of it was to see how the enterprises or the cost shift in the enterprises would look like and who that would impact. It wouldn't necessarily be a rate study, but it would be more of an impact evaluation. So at some time right around September, we plan on coming back to the council and presenting some data related to that. That you all could digest and use to make the most informed decision on whether or not we continue to move forward or not. So that's already in the work. It's something that we're looking forward to, and then I would imagine once after the fiscal year starts, we'll get going on that, and you'll see a presentation pretty similar to what you saw tonight, but all geared around that process and implementing that type of a program.
Any other discussion? You're just gonna have to speak up because I can only see the person speaking.
No one's raised their hands, Julie.
All right, thanks, Ann. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the vote. Counselor Chines, this is on the sewer rates per 100 cubic feet. Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor Dennehy.
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski.
Aye.
Counselor May.
Yes.
Counselor Santos.
Yes.
Counselor Butt.
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay. Moving moving on to vote number 4, the sewer flat rate, sewer flat rate of 3,000 cubic feet and $377.44 per bill. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Any additional discussion on the sewer flat rate?
no one has raised their hand, Julie.
Thank you. Okay, let's do the vote. Counselor Chines,
Yes.
Counselor Danahy,
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski,
Aye.
Counselor May,
Yes.
Counselor Santos,
Yes.
Counselor Butt,
Yes.
myself, yes. Okay, vote number 5, and I need a motion for a manual read meter fee of $50 per quarter.
So moved.
Second,
Any additional discussion?
no hands are raised.
Thanks. Okay, Counselor Chines,
Yes.
Counselor Danahy,
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski,
Aye.
Counselor May,
Yes.
Counselor Santos,
Yes.
Counselor Butt,
Yes.
and myself, yes. And finally, we have the septic disposal rate formula, a facility opening fee of $110, a disposal cost per 100 cubic feet to be calculated and charged at the current sewer rate, and off-hours disposal rate of 3 hours at W4 pay scale times 1.5. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Any discussion?
no one has indicated.
Okay, let's take a vote. Counselor Chines,
Yes.
Counselor Danahy,
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski,
Aye.
Counselor May,
Yes.
Counselor Santos,
Yes.
Counselor Butt,
Yes.
myself, yes. So all affirmative, 7-0. Okay. Thank you for your patience. We are going to move on to item number 10, which is a review of lake events. Steve, do you want to
Madam-
outline some thoughts here?
Sorry, Madam Chair, do we close the public hearing?
Oh, of course we do.
All
Yes,
right.
so motion to
To
close.
close hearing, please.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion on closing it?
None that I see.
Great. Okay, so let's a vote to close the public hearing number 2 on the water and sewer rates. Counselor Chines,
Yes.
Counselor Danahy,
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski,
Aye.
Counselor May,
Yes.
Counselor Santos,
Yes, with thanks to both Joe Conway and Matt Abrams.
Counselor Butt,
Yes.
and myself, yes. So the public hearing is closed. Thank you so much to the DPW, Mr. Abrams, for all the hard work on this.
Madam Chair, did you want to skip over number 9 or?
Oh, no, I do not want to skip
Okay.
over number 9. Of course I do not. In fact, I'm going to let you present that and see if I can get back on the computer.
Okay, certainly. In your packet is a request to authorize the town going out for an RFP for some property, tax title property on Water Street. And, what happens in these instances is that, our office is approached, usually by an abutter, whether it's a residential area or whether it's someone off the street that sees we have tax title, to purchase property to, normally to enhance, what they have. Or in one instance where we just sold property on the Reading line after it closed after a year of some issues, to build a new home. So those things do happen. So we were approached with a request to go out for proposal for some land on Water Street that is, the tax title deed says about approximately 7,000 square feet. I think it's probably around 5,500, but that's not important. The town took this, I think, for $12 in 1948, and it has just sat, there for a long time. So there is a, Cataldo Ambulance is using property abutting that, and they actually go over this property right now to get their ambulance on and off Water Street so they can service the community. And it's important to note that we do not pay Cataldo any tax money for their services to the town. In fact, we get an awful lot back from them. Not that that's here nor there. So they wanted to look at purchasing this land from the town, possibly through the RFP process, because they're looking to purchase the larger parcel where their building is, where the building they're renting is on at 200 Water Street. And that's where they house their ambulance or ambulances and their EMTs and paramedics that stay there, you know, and sometimes sleep and what have you. And it's not a very aesthetic building, and it's not very pleasing to the people in there. I personally like when we do go out to a sale of land in an RFP particularly, that we connect it to a public purpose. So in your packet is a suggestion that this be connected to the purpose of, although price will certainly be considered primary criterion, and Tom Mullen and I worked on this together, that we want to further public purpose such as improving access for emergency vehicles serving the town of Wakefield. That's why that language is in there. I would hate to think that, you know, I guess it would be good in one sense if someone came and bid a lot of money for this property and then used it for maybe, although I don't see how they could, frankly, but used it for maybe a commercial purpose or to add to other land to maybe do a 40B or something like that. So that's why I had the language in there. Certainly, this is up to the town council. All we're asking tonight is to go out to bid and then evaluate them. So, you know, that's basically it. It's a request that we got from a corporate citizen in town, and it's up to the council. So I don't ask town council, Mr. Mullen, if I misstated anything. I don't think I did.
Madam Chair, I concur with everything that Steve said. I would just note that we often set restrictions, other restrictions and criteria in RFPs that have nothing to do with price. I think Steve mentioned one. Frequently, we insist that by way of a restriction that the property never be used as a 40B. Presumably, if we allowed a 40B as a possibility, the bids might come in higher. One thing you can do if you want to take into account Ms. Scott's concerns would be to set a minimum price. And if the minimum price were set at, say, the assessed value, which is presumed to be the appraised value in a town that's at 100% valuation like Wakefield, I should think that would satisfy most of her concerns.
I have a question. Tom, my recollection is we have set a minimum price in the past, perhaps when there was an issue with a bid or we didn't get a bid, or am I completely making that up?
Well, I think that was for other properties. I don't think that we've tried to sell this one.
No, for other properties. That's what I'm asking. Yes.
You're right. Sometimes we do set a minimum bid and we don't get it. And then we try to bid again without a minimum, and we get somebody anyway.
Yep.
So yeah, if you were, I'm certainly not wedded to either adopting a minimum bid or doing the kind of RFP that is being suggested. But if you want to achieve the twin purposes of maximizing utility for the town out of its ambulance service, and at the same time making sure that you at least get fair market value for the property, you might set a minimum bid, hopefully around the appraised value. Now, hiring an appraiser to do an appraisal of this property is probably not cost effective, and the law does allow you to use assessed value as a proxy.
So I mean, I don't have any concerns based on what Ms. Scott said, but we also can reject a bid if someone comes in with a stupid bid.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we
Right.
always reserve the right to reject any or all
Right.
bids in the best interest of the town.
Okay, thank you. Julie, can you see Ed's hand?
Oh, no, I do. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you, and Madam Chair. Mr. Mayo, do we know anything about this property in terms of its ability to be developed?
Well, you know, it is, let's call it 7,000 square feet because that's what it says on some of the paperwork, but I think it's probably closer to 5,600. I mean, it is on Water Street, so it's in a a commercial zoned area. It is not a very large lot at all. It does. I wish I could read the frontage. I need a magnifying glass. Sorry about that, guys. It may have frontage. It is next to a river, so I'm sure there are some considerations there too. My understanding, it's probably best suited for access than anything else. But I'm not an engineer. I haven't done any analysis on that. And by the way, it is assessed for $22,800, which is probably indicative of how it can be used.
And I know oftentimes, Steve, you'll reach out to department heads to ask them if there's any of them have an identified purpose for it. Have you heard anything from anyone?
No one has any use for this, no, as it is.
And Mr. Molinar, do we have the capacity to ask above the assessed value as the minimum?
Oh, yeah, the law doesn't set any ceiling on the amount of a minimum bid that you might want to seek.
I guess my own perspective is that candidly, it is, I think, a prime location. I understand it may have conservation issues and the like. I know it's not a large parcel, but I've seen what has been developed in town, in backyards and, in very small spaces. So I'd hate to see a scenario where we're not realizing the maximum value. I understand, the hesitation that Cataldo is a contract, company with us, and we may not have Cataldo in a few years' time. So I don't think that should be driving our decision making. I do think we need to realize the best value for the town. I would support us if we felt confident in a number to go ahead and set that as the minimum, with the understanding we don't have to accept if we think it's too low. My only concern is that we don't have any understanding of how developable this land is. And I think that could really drive a lot of the potential, value that we could get for the property. And I think we all know that assessed values aren't necessarily the same as what a fair market value would be to a third party. Thank you.
Nathan?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, a question from Mr. Mayo. Is there an access easement for the abutting property 200 Water Street, or is it just sort of a, kind of a verbal agreement that, they can use the property in question to get onto that? Other
200 Water does have access to Water Street on its own. Anyway,
okay.
So there's nothing in writing. What this would do would be allow that building to be either refurbished or rebuilt, the one on 200 Water on a separate lot. And my understanding is then more ambulances could be housed there, which would be presumably good for the town.
Okay, but so there are no encumbrances on the property from any kind of restrictions or easements that would.
I have not done a title search on this. My guess is no, only because it was taken for tax title so long ago. So I'm thinking probably not on it.
I mean, given that sharing sort of my own perspective, I mean, I am comfortable with the RFP approach, and I do like Mr. Mullen's suggestion about putting a minimum price in place. I guess I would be careful to kind of, be too ambitious in what that minimum price is. I mean, it is a very, very small piece of land. Even without any sort of restrictions or encumbrances, it's hard to imagine that anything, kind of commercially useful could be built there. And so I certainly, want to make sure that we don't shortchange what the town gets, but if we're talking about a parcel of land with an assessed value of $22,000, I mean, we're not going to be talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars here. I mean, the dollars and kind of the incremental difference is probably not all that significant. And so given that, I'd be comfortable with a stipulation that the minimum bid be no less than the assessed value.
Thanks, go ahead. Ann McDonald, and then we'll go down to Ann Danahy. Did you already speak?
Yep, I'm just a little concerned about raising it above the assessed when none of us really know what we're doing. We're not realtors, so I'd be concerned that we would be coming up with a number that we can't set, but I'm certainly the number that someone bids can come back to us and we can say no. So I'm just a little nervous about us throwing a number out there when I don't know that any of us has that ability to name it tonight, certainly. But I also don't think we need to extend this conversation to another meeting. Thank you.
And Danny?
A question, do we have to put a dollar amount in the RFP, or could we just say, can they name their price, what they're willing to pay? And then we have the ability to reject it if it's, if they say $10, that we can say, well, no, we're going to reject that.
Yeah, there's no legal requirement of setting a minimum.
And no requirement to accept any bid.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. I kind of like the idea of letting them tell us what it's worth to them, because that might drive up the price a little bit because it's their one opportunity to purchase the property. And it might be, it's not us telling them like a minimum. And it's not, and then when we're not going too high with them saying, no, we're not going to do that. So that would be my recommendation.
Ed? Ed?
I think just one other thing to keep in mind is if we look at it from the reverse, and it's let's focus less on the ability to develop this parcel, but instead look at what the value add is to 200 Water Street as a result of having a larger plot plan. And I don't know if that would, mean that it expands to allow for more thresholds, or, then suddenly the value of 200 becomes a lot. So you might spend 20,000 for it, but maybe then if you were to, combine the lots, then it becomes, 200 suddenly becomes like that much more, valuable. So it sounds like no harm, no foul from what we're hearing. I don't think that we should be driving the decision on the fact that it is Cataldo who has a current contract with us. But from what Mr. Mullen has said, if we put it out to bid now, then we can at least understand. I do think it's reasonable for us to do a bit of due diligence, even while that process is going on, though, to get a sense of, what a reasonable number is, to accept for the property. Because if someone comes in with $5,000, say that, or even 20,000, and we are better educated to know that it could be worth 50, then that would obviously be something we would reject. So I think we could probably do them in tandem. I feel like we don't know enough about this value, but if we're putting something out to bid, letting the market kind of dictate and not committing to having to sell it if we don't like the value, probably feels like the best strategy going forward, if that works for other folks.
I think I would just,
with that due diligence, I do think that a degree of due diligence in the meantime, not to hold up things, but in the meantime, I think is helpful for us, because I want to see us make an informed decision here.
yeah. And I'm going to go a little different path on this. This is right on the Mill River. Is that correct, Steve?
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
No, that's it. I would really like to see conservation or commission or somebody weigh in on, I mean, there's a lot of value just to keeping pieces of land near rivers, not paved over, and understand kind of if there's any watershed value or any kind of overflow flooding value, or if it's going to exacerbate problems on the Mill River if it's built on. So I don't know whether Conservation Commission is the person who can, the group to do that, but, and I'm not opposed to sending it out to bid, but I definitely would like that contemplated.
It's a great point.
Okay, anybody else? So somebody want to make a motion? There's a couple of different scenarios here.
So,
Can I try
Madam Chair,
one? Or go ahead, Jonathan.
no problem. I move to authorize Town Administrator Mayo to put the property out to bid with the caveat that, we'll express a preference for a use of lands that will further a public purpose. Further caveat that we set a minimum bid at the assessed value of the property, and also with a request that Town Administrator Mayo address some of the questions that we've raised here, including alternative uses for the property and conservation value. I apologize to Madam Clerk for a long motion there.
Do we have a second to that? Do you have an alternative?
Second.
Okay. So is there any discussion about that particular motion? Ed, please.
I agree with Councilor Danahy that we don't do a minimum bid, like she was saying, because we're not restricted, by any means. And if we don't like the number, we don't have to accept it. So I think maybe just letting the market dictate what sort of interest there is in that. But I would also just like to see us have a better understanding of what the market value is. I don't know how that's established in a cost-effective way or a time-effective way, but I would like to be able to better understand that, and absolutely have Conservation Commission or whomever weigh in on any of sort of the impacts, including DPW weighing in from a stormwater perspective, as Madam Chair has suggested. I think that's really important.
Yes, absolutely.
Madam Chair, I'm happy to amend my motion to take out the minimum bid. I honestly don't feel strongly one way or the other on that question.
Okay. Do we have to second an amended bid?
Second.
Okay. Ed, did you want to, your hand was, okay, you're still. Okay. So the motion is to have Mr. Mayo prepare a bid for public use value with language for public use value, given that there'll also be assessments of alternative uses and conservation value when we make the decision. I think I captured it. Or you can make it more beautiful in real life. Let's take a vote. Any additional discussion? Nope. Okay. Councillor Chines.
Yes.
Councillor Danahy.
Yes.
Councillor Dombrowski.
Aye.
Councillor May.
Yes.
Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Butt.
Yes.
And myself, yes. So vote as 7-0, motion passes.
Perfect, thank you.
Great. Okay, now we can move on to the Lake Quannapowitt event discussion. Excited about. So there's a list of events that are already requested for the coming year. Steve, you want to walk us through kind of what you're seeing and hearing?
Sure. So Councilor Santos brought this up at the last meeting, and we've heard this from a lot of citizens too. A lot of citizens have been very happy that the lake hasn't been, in their words, not mine, overrun with, constant walks and constant festivals that spill over into the neighborhoods. And they really love going down there with their cup of coffee and their book or their lawn chair or their Frisbee or all of them, and really enjoy the common. And I got to say, driving by is really nice to see a lot of people enjoying it, during this time. So during the pandemic, of course, last year nothing happened. And this year we started, I think right when the first vaccine was in somebody's arm in December, somewhere in the state of Massachusetts, we started getting, requests from people in some of our groups that have been there for years, asking what's going to happen. We told them we weren't approving anything because we couldn't. So in your packet, you have a number of requests for walks and et cetera. I put them into a couple of different categories. I think the WCAT movies by the lake, I think the Wakefield Summer Band free concerts. I think that those uses are really like, you know, what the neighborhood likes, going down with their blanket and their book and what have you. Those are, you know, very low, not very intensive, very low use. Might have 100 people or 200 people at a movie, all Wakefield people, all enjoying themselves. I think those are things that pandemic is over, people are craving for them. We should do it. Where the concern is coming in and where our questions are getting are all of the walks. And some of them are Wakefield centric groups like Wave. Okay, Wave. They have a walk every year. They have a request in here. Uses like the First Parish Church, although that's maybe a little bit more intensive. That's one of our groups. Where we are getting a lot of concerns in the neighborhoods on, and these are, I gotta say, fabulous, wonderful charities. I'm not saying there's any issue with any, and they're all worthy. But some of these have, you know, 500 people or more. There's one request in here, there'll be 1,000 people, and that's in their request. So I understand that these groups have been very pleasant and very patient this year. And my suggestion will be, you have a list in front of you for this summer, and for this summer only, those that have put in requests to us, and they're all groups that we've had before. I don't think there's anybody different, right, Sherry? Everyone here is pretty much as we've had before.
No, we've had them all before.
Okay. And not any issues, that they be granted through the town administrator's office, which is your policy. But I do think that we spend some time coming out for next year and really thinking hard, because I think there has to be a policy discussion here that if, and what I'm hearing from people, if it's not a Wakefield group, and I mean a Wakefield group, meaning the Greenwood School PTO, the Wakefield Track Boosters, Wave, Woodville School PTO, that we really think about saying, hey, we're only going to have these walks or these events for those groups. So you probably have 20 odd groups in here. We do have one conflict where I think we could move someone to a rain date that they had already requested. And what is nice about this year, because this has come up too, it's not every weekend, both days, which is what we were running into years ago. So in August, you have a Sunday event and a Saturday event, and you have the band concerts. In September, you have 2 Sundays and 2 Saturdays. October gets a little bit more, but one is the Festival by the Lake. 1, 2, 3, 4 events in October out of the 5 weekends. And then you have a very hearty group, the Run for the Ages, who I guess are 65 and older, that's going November 6th. So I guess they can handle the cold. So that's my suggestion, that we work and allow these groups this year, because they've been waiting patiently, as requested, through all the criteria that we have before, and then come up with a more ironclad policy for calendar year 22. I think that's fair.
Great summary. Anne.
The one question I have, Steve, and I think that is fair for this year, is you have a Saturday and a Sunday in September. Like, is there any way, you know, that's the whole weekend, followed by the next weekend that's overrun by the Festival by the Lake, which is great, it's our people, but you have 2 weekends in a row where both Saturday and Sunday, I think, are.
You're looking at September 19th, September 25th, and September 26th.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So American Prevention for Suicide Prevention, Mission of Deeds, that I assume is a Saturday and a Sunday.
That is, yeah.
And then the following Saturday and Sunday is Festival by the Lake. I just don't know if, you know, Mission of Deeds is asking for 4 tents for just 100 to 200 people. I don't know if one of those, if they need to go that day. I know we're going to look at it and we're going to do this differently, but I'd hate to take an entire weekend. And that's probably one of the prettiest times that we have is late September. I don't know.
Yeah. We can certainly it would mean, there is going to be another weekend in that you'd be, and the Festival by the Lake is 2 days, I guess. Is one a rain date, or is that they're actually there 2 days?
They're actually there 2 days.
They're actually there 2 days, okay.
I mean, I'm not pushing strongly. I just think, moving forward, I'm definitely a fan of, like you said, cutting this way back, but.
We can certainly see about, trying to make sure we don't have that Saturday, Sunday and that weekend,
And if we have to, that's fine, but maybe we just they don't get 3/10 and 4/10.
Right.
Maybe we limit the tents perhaps. Okay, that's all.
I totally understand and like appreciate the balance between residents using the lake and then also these groups being able to have access to it. I think I come at it more from the perspective of how this could potentially help our business community. And I don't know, I think there are a few things that we can do kind of going forward. I think we can have obviously any number of stipulations. Maybe one of the stipulations is that anyone that is involved with these groups, they have to do a certain level of promotion of, I don't know, the downtown or whatever the case is, to drive people down afterwards, have some sort of like after event promotion or coupons or whatever the case might be, working with the chamber, working with Main Streets, working with whomever on that, and make that a condition that they have to consult with Aaron Kokinda and maybe those groups as a condition to make sure we have a better integration of the event with the downtown. And perhaps, especially with the races, it really frustrates me when there are races that begin at the head of the lake. So people park there, run our lake, take up all the sidewalk space, and then drive away back onto 128. So the idea of town hall parking lot, Common Street, there's often on the weekends a good amount of parking availability there too. So the idea of having certain requirements so that some of these events have to have more of a base closer to our downtown. Obviously, Festival by the Lake is an example of that, but there are plenty of others that may be. I'd like to be able to think through, even for this year, certain stipulations or requirements that we could have so that we do have a better integration than currently, because it does feel like a lot of groups may just come in, drop their tents, do their thing, and then leave. So I think that's reasonable for us to expect that they make the effort, whatever that effort looks like. But I feel strongly that we have to do something even this year to make sure there's better integration. Thank you.
Anybody else? So I think those are both really good ideas. Is it an actual policy that we have to amend, Steve?
Yeah, I think that we do have a lake use policy right now that was adopted a few years ago. So we would want to redraft that. And that policy does allow for those big, large, thousands of groups, as long as there is a Wakefield connection. And it's very, it's not maybe it's certainly not a group that's based in Wakefield like Wave. It's very
so maybe we want to move it to more of a based in Wakefield, but also incorporate a lot of Ed's ideas on connections.
Right. And we can certainly incorporate Ed's ideas this year too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jonathan, you had something to add?
No, I agree with that. I mean, I think those are two of the policy dimensions I think that we want to talk through more. I would just add a third one. We may also want to look at limits to when we permit certain events of a certain size. So I'm mindful of Councilor Santos's comments that it is kind of tricky when you have two events with hundreds and hundreds of people potentially on the same weekend. And so, there may be sort of almost kind of a metering of events so that, we don't have kind of clustering of use of the lake, within a certain time period. I don't know what the right answer to that is, but I think there's probably some thought that, maybe we can make kind of, over the next, several weeks or months to kind of come up with a policy draft that maybe we can bring back to the council at a future date.
Danny?
Hi, sorry, my Wi-Fi was going out, so I really missed most of the conversation. So if I repeat anything, I apologize. But I think the issue of the lake, it's been so wonderful to see people, especially during the pandemic. I think people who weren't used to going to the lake found the lake and have been really enjoying it. I see people sitting on the benches a lot more, and I think that's a wonderful thing. I think for this season, I don't know if things are already scheduled that, you know, keep those as is, because it's people are planning in the process of planning their events. But in the future, I'd like to see something. I think when you get into the numbers thing, it gets hard because somebody could say, oh, it's only going to be 200, and then the event happens, and then there's, you know, 1,000 people that show up, and they say, oh, we had no idea, and then somebody who says there's 1,000 gets denied. I think it just gets really messy. What I'd like to see is maybe just a time limit, maybe one day a month or 2 days a month, 2 days a month, but I wouldn't do them on a Saturday and a Sunday. I would say, like, you know, the second and fourth Saturday, or the second Saturday and fourth Sunday is when we allow events to be held at the lake. And then you don't have to get into a process of, is it a Wakefield group or, and I agree with Steve, I'm not talking about the movies on the lake or the bands at the lake or festival by the lake, but like outside organizations, mostly outside. They could have a Wakefield affiliation. So that'd be my suggestion. And I'm sorry if I repeated anything.
Yeah. Some new ideas. So Steve, you want to, we can take all these ideas back and draft something?
I think the big thing is that we will go forward with this year with those suggestions and try to move a couple of weekends, but I think we need to come back with a policy.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure there was an appetite for that. So, yes.
Okay. Great. So we don't really need a vote on this until we have the actual policy in front of
No,
us.
it's just a direction. So that's good.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on this topic before we move on? Okay, moving on to item number 11, public meetings update. Ed and Ann, I know you were a bit of a ad hoc working group on this, and we haven't given you much time, but anything you want to report?
Gonna start, Ann?
You can start, Ed.
So we've had ongoing discussions with about the idea of remote participation and what it looks like once we are no longer all on Zoom all the time. And with great credit to Mr. Mayo and Todd Bowden in our IT department, they've been working through this along with Ryan Boyd and Ian McDermott at WCAT. And so Councillor Danahy and I came into this discussion with them having done a good amount of kind of background on this. We've been focused a lot on really the how we can make it so that we can have this level of participation going forward, so that members of the public can feel as engaged as they do via Zoom without having to be present, and also allowing for a pairing with our policy for members of various boards, committees, and commissions to be able to also participate remotely under certain circumstances. Based upon that, we now are at a point where we have some ideas in terms of pricing relative to basically outfitting the first and second floor conference rooms in town hall. But our objectives are pretty clear. We want to make sure that we have in-person participation, we have remote public participation, remote member participation, and the opportunity for remote presenter participation. And we think that those will all be positive steps in. We've actually been talking about this in various forms pre-pandemic, but the pandemic certainly brought it all to the forefront. The way we've left discussion now is Todd Bowden from our IT is going to be going through the various elements that have been quoted out thus far. Our hope is to basically get us through the summer in some sort of comparable capacity to where we are now, with the hope being that after Labor Day we'll really be full throttle with this. We want to make it user friendly so that everyone can understand, if you're running a meeting, how to do it. And I don't know if anyone has the latest in terms of where the House is in terms of expanding the ability to not have a quorum in person. But that obviously was a consideration too, because I know a lot of meetings are looking to continue in this format, at least for the short term. But I think we're making great headway. And again, it's with great credit to Todd Bode and Mr. Mayo and our team at WCIT, who's been tremendous partners.
To answer Ed's question, I spoke with Donald Wong tonight at the Juneteenth flag raising, and he indicated that it's possible that tomorrow there would be a vote at the House, but they are a little bit, they have to do some reconciliation with the Senate. There's some different dates there about how long certain aspects are going to continue. But it would be nice if they had a formal session. That's what he told me. They'd hopefully have that tomorrow or the next day and could maybe get that moving. So,
and just so anyone who's watching who may not be familiar, if you are a member of a board or commission or committee, as of tomorrow, technically, we need to have an in-person quorum in order to comply with the open meeting laws and all the rules relative to having those meetings. The Senate has passed an extension of that to allow us to continue in this format, and we're just waiting on the House. So that's kind of where things are at this point. But I think everything is looking positive. It's just a matter of making sure we have the right solution that works for everyone. And certainly, please give this ad hoc working group your input. Anything you have to add to, Ann, as well?
No, I think you covered all the points. That was really good. It was the idea is that when we do it, that we want it to work well. We want it to be user friendly. So we'll make sure that before we do it, that it's tested and that it works. But yes, thank you to your friends at WCAT and Todd and Steve. It was really helpful to have all of that work done.
Sounds like good progress. Jonathan?
Just a question, Mr. Mayo and Ms. Dalton, and first of all, thank you, Ed and Ann, for the work on this. So given that the state of emergency expires tomorrow, and technically any meetings that we have do need to have an in-person quorum, are the boards and commissions that are scheduled to meet this week, are they aware of that? Given that it seems unlikely that we would have kind of new legislation passed before, 7 o'clock tomorrow night when School Committee and Human Rights Commission and whoever else is on the docket is scheduled to meet.
Well, school committees, go ahead.
Madam Chair, if I could just jump in, I'm scheduled to give a talk to the Human Rights Commission in a remote meeting tomorrow night. Oddly, on the subject of the open meeting law, which we will then be violating.
Well,
yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
So, and again, I apologize. I mean, I guess, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Mullen, is there, should we be looking at postponing these meetings, or I guess how do we, or are we kind of taking the approach of,
is there a grant, if the bill passes, is it a grandfather situation?
Well, if the bill passes, then there's no problem because there's an extension, right? If the bill doesn't pass, I think we have two options. One is to just go ahead with the noticed meeting, and yeah, technically it's a violation. On the other hand, at least people have had ample notice, and everybody has by now gotten used to how to do a Zoom meeting. Or we can comply with the open meeting law technically to the extent we can by making an emergency change to the posting and indicating a real live physical space that we will occupy at a given time.
Okay. Marion, go ahead, Steve, and then Marion.
I was saying that the public has really enjoyed the Zoom aspect of this, right? They can participate in every meeting. So that's really what we're doing. I've spoken to a lot of the boards, Finance Committee. In fact, member was commenting to us tonight. He's so thrilled we're going to be meeting in person. He hasn't even met a lot of the members of the board in person. So, they know, our Board of Appeals knows. I'm really more concerned with our adjudicatory boards because they have public hearings, but we'll do the best we can. And we did adopt the remote participation policy. So members of those boards or committees or commissions that would prefer, for whatever reason, because of, maybe they're not vaccinated, who knows? Their chair could certainly allow that within that 4 exceptions to do that. So yeah, we will be, I was frankly hoping they would adopt this last week and wouldn't have this problem. And I don't know why they didn't. So.
Maureen?
But we'll cross that bridge. We'll be fine.
Yeah, just to echo what was been said. I mean, I don't know if we've run the numbers, Sherry and Steve, but I read somewhere that like in some towns, public participation was up by 300%. That's the level of people participating in things. So I think people are used to it. I think there are people clamoring to get back in person, but some sort of hybrid. The other thing for Councillor Dabrowski and Councillor Dennehy, just to put an asterisk, I heard you say that at Town Hall, we're looking at, the capabilities of those 2 conference rooms. We just have so many commissions and boards. I just want to consider the library as also getting one of those. So I know our book club, so like that conference room could be held. I also maybe think about the rooms in the Civic Center where where like recreation committee meets and other groups, like, we're going to run out of meeting spaces soon. I know WCAT will handle it, but just to think about some of those other places where people have meetings as well, particularly, the library is already on board, but I don't know if we have one at the AmeriCal and if that's something we should be looking at. And but yeah, those were just my thoughts. And actually, if we could get the numbers of how public participation, looking this year to last year, it would just be an interesting project as I look at Sherry kind of glaring. But it would be interesting to know if we had more people, which we know we all did, but what the numbers look like.
Ed?
I just wanted to also finally add that this could really have a profoundly positive impact on civic engagement, especially with adjudicatory boards like the ZBA. Oftentimes, I know, especially with the butters, they get notice of a hearing, they appear, and then it gets continued, and then it gets continued again and again and again. And that's really difficult. And I know that it's oftentimes used as a strategy. And with development, I know we all share and hear a lot about your concerns for development going forward. The idea of someone being able to have that greater accessibility to be participating in the process is something that could really revolutionize the way that people are engaged with our town and making decisions. So it's a really positive. It's not just the convenience of the members, but also of the public at large. And I think it will really have the potential for a profoundly positive impact. And also, I was remiss in not mentioning our clerk, Sherry Dalton, who is also a part of that working group and continues to be and her contribution. So thank you for that.
And Annie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say is that Councillor Dabrowski, you're spot on that. I agree with that. And Councillor Butt, that's a really good point, is that I think I was thinking of the 2 conference rooms, but then there's too many boards in town to fit all those meetings. So that's a really good point. But I think that we agree, we've seen a great value of civic engagement through, a lesson learned from the pandemic. So thanks.
I don't think we've resolved the question of what we're doing. Is there any value? I know we're going to dissolve our own emergency declaration tonight. Is there any value to keeping that in place as a show that we want to keep meeting until the legislation passes?
Well, legally, no. There's nothing that we can do at the local level to change the open meeting law.
That's what I thought. Okay. Jonathan?
Thank you. Just I glanced at the schedule of meetings this week, and it does look like it's a fairly light week of meetings. I don't know if that was by design or just luck. The sort of probably the most important one that is on the calendar is school committee tomorrow night, but I'm assuming that they are having at least given that they've been meeting physically at WCAT, I'm assuming that's not a concern.
If I may, real quick, school committee will be in studio tomorrow in full.
So again, there are a couple of non-adjudicatory boards and commissions that are meeting this week, but I wonder if it's something that we sort of let pass just given the circumstances and given the pending legislation.
Well,
I
and
don't
even
know.
if they're in, and just Counselor Chang, just to, even if they're in studio, like how is the public? Like it's about the public participating also, right? That's what expires tomorrow also, so.
Well,
So should we all just kind of call Rep. Lippert Garabedian and Rep. Wong tonight after this meeting and just kind of.
I impressed upon them last week that we have an open meeting law posting issue that you don't have at the legislature, but we have to post these, 48 hours in advance. So I was hoping that would push them along. So any help, but I understand they're going to meet on it tomorrow. That's what I'm hearing. So.
All right, I think we move forward.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Moving on to item 12, the proposed 40B at Wakefield North Apartments. This is not a vote. This is a letter where we can give input into what we want to tell Mass Housing about this particular 40B application. Steve, you put a draft in the packet. If there's anything that any counselors want to discuss or add, now's your chance. And Danny? Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, Maureen. I think Maureen was.
Yeah.
Oh, you're still.
Oh, that's
Go ahead, Danny.
Okay. So went to the site visit, and the one thing that we noticed, Councilor Dombrowski was there too, is that they talk about people being able to walk to the commuter rail, which is a mile away, but there's no sidewalks for them to walk to, and they can cross the street and walk on the sidewalk across the street, but that sidewalk is our recreational space. It's for people who are walking the lake. And so those of you who walk the lake, you know that there's a pattern a direction that people follow. And then you have commuters. Then you have commuters coming. It's already kind of gets a little crowded on the lake, people just walking for recreational purposes. Now you have people going in the opposite direction. I just think that it infringes. I think that should definitely be part of a letter, is that there needs to be sidewalks put in that will connect it to the commuter rail, and not rely on using our sidewalk, which is really, sounds kind of crazy on North Ave, the sidewalks on North Ave, but it is recreational space.
Absolutely. Ed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there is also not much of a recognition or value realized to the fact that this project would have a number of implications on our public services. I know that they had pointed out, one of the developers specifically said, well, you can't use the schools as a basis. That's illegal to do that. But there are a lot of other ways in which this project would impact us, traffic-wise, as I think we've talked about in the past. A lot of our police, fire, et cetera, senior center. There's a lot of services, and also like our capital projects too. I mean, there are any number of impacts that I think from our meeting seem to be rather minimized, if you will. And to Councilor Downey's point, it was made out to be, oh, you can just walk down to the train, as if it wasn't a big deal. And we literally parked across the street. And then we met in the Knights of Columbus parking lot. It took us like several minutes to cross North Ave because cars were speeding by. The sidewalks I know will be installed at 598 and 600. They're not there yet. The town will do those, but even still, it becomes a sidewalk to nowhere, because once you go past the Knights of Columbus, once you get to the Knights of Columbus parking lot, you're really on your own. And it's not a viable commuter route the way that it's being presented. You're short of someone, God forbid, getting killed, having to cross North Ave, especially in the mornings when it's very hectic. So I do think there are a number of layers to it that, if the council's okay with it, I think perhaps Councilor Danahy and I could give a little bit more of a debrief to Mr. Mayo and just kind of add these concerns to the letter if it's okay with everyone else. I mean, they're all, I think we all just generally have concerns, but there were some specifics that did kind of come out of that meeting too that were not encouraging and I think kind of glossed over.
That sounds like a great idea, Ed.
Really good idea. I mean, I guess and I didn't get to go to the visit. I definitely think walking seems like a stretch. Biking might be a little more realistic for getting to the commuter rail. But then of course we have no bike, not even just racks. I mean, you really need kind of bike cages for something like that. So I don't know if there's a way to add that kind of thing. I know when they were here, I asked for them to have bike routes. So maybe there's some component there we can add in. Anybody else have anything? Jonathan, did you have something to add?
Sure. Just one other thing to add, and I certainly agree that, highlighting the fact that, yes, while it is, within 2,500 feet or whatever the number is that they cited of a commuter rail station, that is a tricky walk. The other thing I would highlight is, while it is on an MBTA bus route, it is not a bus route that runs all that frequently. And, I think a lot of people would argue not all that reliably. And so I think as we think about that as a location for, kind of public transit access, I think there are aspects of it that, kind of check the box, but when you dig beneath the surface really aren't there. And so I would maybe ask, in addition to sort of the walkability component on North Ave, that we add the fact that it is not a frequent bus route. It's not a bus route that, a lot of people tend to find that they can rely upon for sort of regular commuting access.
All right, Steve, you have enough to?
Yep.
And you have offers of help. Okay. Item 13 is the dissolution of the emergency declaration, which we amazingly passed back on March 18th, 2020. Remember that special meeting? So we determined it is no longer needed. Do we need to vote to dissolve it, Steve, right?
I would think so, yes.
Okay, so I need a motion to vote to dissolve the state of emergency declaration for the town of Wakefield.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just want to take a moment, like it hits you that was March 18th.
Yeah.
That,
Wasn't like a Friday, it was like a Friday morning. I think we were all shell shocked.
Yeah.
Okay.
And our first town council meeting too in the studio, I was next to Steve and I remember like asking people to like text me with the word talk if you wanted to talk, because we had like a speakerphone basically next to a microphone. Like that's literally how we operated, but we did it. We never missed a meeting, right? We all got through it.
Okay, so to vote to dissolve it happily, Councillor Chines.
Yes.
Councillor Danahy.
Yes.
Councillor Dombrowski.
Aye.
Councillor May had to leave. Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Butt.
Yes.
Myself, yes. So motion passes 6-0. Okay, we have a number of donations. I have a motion to request, accept, and expend a gift to the library in the amount of $197 from various donors with thanks.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? None. Councillor Chines.
Yes.
Councillor Danahy.
Yes.
Councillor Dombrowski.
Aye.
Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Butt.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay. Moving on to our second donation, a request to accept and expend gift or gifts to the Recreation Department in the amount of $500 from the Savings Bank with thanks. Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Councillor Chines.
Yes.
Councillor Danahy.
Yes.
Councillor Dombrowski.
Aye.
Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Butt.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you for those donations. Warrants. John.
Sure, Madam Chair. So on June 1st, I signed warrants 42, 44, 45, and 46. Total of $18.6 million of general expenditures and another $7.8 million of payroll. Details in the packet if anyone has any questions.
Great, thank you. Okay, item 16 is announcements. So before I open it up, I just want to share the liaison assignments. I think I've captured them all. If not, please let me know. We have Vice Chair Butt as liaison to the Commission on Disability Issues, Traffic Advisory Committee, the Veterans Advisory Board, and what we're calling kind of overall committee support. Any help to get some of the committee policies and procedures straight. Councilor Chimes is liaison to Permanent Building Committee, School Committee, and Youth Committee. Councilor Danahy to Human Rights Commission, the Senior Center / Council on Aging, and the Building Department. Councilor Dabrowski and Councilor May are going to work together on the Economic Development Council, the Department of Public Works, the Wakefield Municipal Gas and Light Department, and the Historical Commission. Councilor Santos has everything public safety, so police, fire, ambulance, probably emergency services too. So those departments. And myself, Environmental Sustainability, Finance Committee, which is the role the chair takes, Capital Planning, and Library. Did I miss any?
I think I have Board of Health too.
You have Board of Health, okay. I knew I felt like I was missing somebody. Great. So the committees and departments will be receiving notification of that. So thank you all for serving on those. And there's some new ones for the public's information. There's some new liaisons to new boards and departments. So it'll be interesting to hear how that works out and to get those reports. The other thing we actually did discuss and we'll be reaching out is that the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Planning Board, and the Conservation Commission, we're going to try to set up some quarterly reports coming to the council, probably on a joint basis, so that we can kind of have a good grasp of what's happening within those important committees. Doing great work around town. Does anybody else have any announcements?
Just
yeah, go ahead.
Briefly, and I know Julie, you're part of this as well, just to congratulate all the graduating seniors. I have a daughter who graduated, Julie has a daughter who graduated. They have been through a little bit of hell and back for, almost 2 years, and they missed so many things. So to see some semblance of normalcy in a little bit of prom and some graduation was really wonderful. And I just want to wish everyone the best of luck moving forward.
I second that. The school committee the school did a great program at the high school. Maureen.
Just a few announcements. So this Saturday is Juneteenth, which one of the votes that this legislature did take last year was make it an official state holiday. It will be celebrated on the 18th. I was not able to go to the flag raising today, so if anyone wants to update on that, I would love to hear about it, but just wishing everyone Juneteenth Day at the end of the week. And then I don't know if we recognized in this meeting, but Ruth Clay officially retired, and Elaine Silva, this is a Board of Health update, but we'll share it. And Elaine Silva will be the interim Board of Health director with Melrose. And so really excited. Thank you, Ruth Clay, for getting us through the pandemic. And thank you, Elaine, for stepping up in that position. And the reason I was just giving that update is I was looking on the state website, and as of June 10th, we have a 61% vaccination rate. So we went through this whole meeting and didn't really talk about the pandemic. So I'm ending it congratulating us on 61%. We have a little ways to go. I will say they break it down by age, and my age group is doing okay, not as good as the 75 plus age group. So we have a little bit more work to do. But I know a lot of the mass vaccination clinics are closing, but keep on reaching out to people if they need help from somebody getting an appointment, getting to an appointment, please reach out, because we're not at the herd immunity yet. We're getting there, but 61% is great. So just want to thank Ruth and Elaine for helping us as a town get there.
Jonathan.
Great. Thank you. First off, I just want to echo Anne's congratulations to the class of 2021, and also just to give a little bit of a shout out to our moving up classes, our moving on classes, the Galvin students from the class of 25 that'll be moving on to the high school next year, and our elementary school students from the class of 2029 will be moving on to the Galvin. Congratulations to them as well, and good luck in the fall. Couple of announcements. Vision 2030, our third virtual public forum is going to be held next Monday at this time, June 21st at 7 o'clock. Again, that will be on Zoom, and people can pre-register by going to the town website and clicking on the Vision 2030 link, and it will have the information to pre-register there. While we focused on, I would say, more traditional sort of bricks and mortar planning type topics over the last two forums, this one's going to be a little bit different, where we're focusing on topics that are less related to, again, sort of bricks and mortar and building in town. So we'll be talking about diversity and inclusion, education and lifelong learning, health and public safety, and also fostering community involvement. So I'm excited for the discussion. We're going to have a few people from the community actually presenting around these topics before we open it up to the group. So I'm sure we'll have another robust set of discussion again next Monday, and hope we can get some great attendance there. Sorry.
Bless you.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
May have just said feedback there. Another opportunity for public feedback. The MBTA is engaging in some visioning work around busing redesign. There was a public meeting last week where they talked about their Better Bus project and some of the work that they're doing to solicit feedback around how they can improve the system in the future. And what's encouraging about this is they're taking the approach of looking at sort of the system as a whole, not just starting from where they are today. And so to the extent that people have feedback around, different ideas for bus routes, different ways in which they can kind of connect not only kind of suburban communities like Wakefield into Boston, but also kind of connect the network sort of across the region, they're soliciting some feedback there. So if you go onto the MBTA website or mbta.com/BNRD survey, there's an opportunity to share your feedback there, and certainly hope that people do that. Finally, just wanted to mention, I do have office hours coming up this coming Wednesday from 6 to 7:30 in front of the library. I don't think it'll be raining then, so hopefully people can join me for that. And I do just want to also echo Councilor Butt's comments. The Juneteenth ceremony, which many of us were able to attend, was really beautiful. In particular, the poet who spoke and the vocalist who sang Lift Every Voice and Sing. And so it was great to see the event, and hope that we can have a bigger crowd next year, and hopefully better weather when we do this again.
Great. Ed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that it might make sense if we could reach out to Jen McDonald in communications and really get the word out to the community even more about what our delegation has been doing relative to the ramp at the station, at the commuter rail station here. It matters a lot. It impacts a lot of people, and I think the more letters, emails, et cetera, that we can get going, and especially if we can do it in a more coordinated way, I think that would be a really good approach. I think we had a retreat this past week and it did come up, and I just think that's such an important piece. And I know that Representative Garabedian, along with Representative Wong and Senator Lewis, are all committed to that. So let's do the advocacy that we can do for our community that way. And I also just want to give a shout out to our Department of Public Works. They did, and our Forestry Division specifically, they did a phenomenal job. There was destruction of a tree on Main Street, and it was just terrible. It was a tree that had been planted recently. It was basically chopped, and no idea why. The police are investigating it, but DPW was there and able today, this morning, to put a new tree in there, to send the message that, we're going to do what's right, and we're going to make sure that, we keep our tree inventory up there. So it was really, really heartening to see. And it was just a great example of seeing how, local government can really serve the residents, that are in town. So it was a really nice thing to see happen. And if you run by the Maple on Main Street, be sure to check it out. But I know that it's being well taken care of. Thank you.
Anyone else? And see?
Oh, good.
No, okay. Matters not anticipated for the agenda? Noreen, your hand's not up, right? Okay. All right, so I think we could have a motion to adjourn and reconvene on Monday, June 28th at 7 p.m. And that will very likely be in studio, at least for those who are comfortable doing so. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second.
Any discussion? None. Councillor Trians?
Yes.
Councillor Danahy? Councillor Dombrowski?
Aye.
Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Councillor Butt?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Motion passes 6-0. Have a wonderful evening. See you in 2
You
weeks.
as well. Thank you.
Thank you.